Amazon Bedrock is a brand new service from AWS that lets you use AI to generate text and images. If you've ever used OpenAI or ChatGPT, then it's similar to that for text generation. You can use it to summarize content or even generate new text content. You can use it to generate images as well. So in this case, I've provided a text prompt for a golden retriever image, and this was generated using Amazon Bedrock. It's quite similar to Midjourney if you've ever used that before. Amazon Bedrock itself is not an AI model. It's just the platform that gives you API access to other state-of-the-art models. So for text and chat, you can use Anthropic's Claude model, which is similar to OpenAI's GPT model. For images, you get access to the Stable Diffusion XL model for image generation. In this tutorial, we'll cover the setup process for Amazon Bedrock. Then we'll take a look at a couple of basic examples of how to generate text content and images using the Bedrock API. We'll be doing that using Python code. It's all really easy and only takes a couple of minutes. Finally, we'll also take a look at pricing to see how much it all costs and how it compares to OpenAI. So if that sounds good, let's get started. To set up Amazon Bedrock, you'll first need an AWS account. I also recommend that you have the AWS CLI installed and configured so that we can use it later. If you don't have these things yet, then pause the video and take a moment to install them, and I'll provide a link in the comments where I also have a video tutorial on how to set up AWS. Once you have that, log into your AWS console and then type in Bedrock in the search bar. You should see the service pop up, so just click on it to go to that page. Next, you have to select to use one of the regions that support Bedrock. Right now, there's not that many regions where it's available, but I recommend either US East 1 or US West 2 because I've discovered that those ones have the most features. So in this case, I'm using US West 2. Once you've selected your region, click here to get started. You should get this pop-up saying that you need to manage model access. That's because when you first sign on to Bedrock, you don't actually get any of the AI models we're about to use yet. But this is really easy. So if you have this pop-up, just go ahead and click here. But if you don't have the pop-up, you can manage the model access here as well. So go ahead and click that. These are all the available models, but they're disabled by default. So to enable them, click Edit, and then just click the check boxes to enable all of them. Click Save Changes. Now, you might have to fill in a form to access this Anthropic Claude model. I've already filled it in, so maybe it's not showing up again for me, but if it shows you to fill in a form, then I recommend you do that because this is by far the best text model available on Bedrock, and it's totally worth it. And make sure you also have the Stable Diffusion model because this is the only image generation model available here. Once you have access to the models, you can play around with it by clicking on the playground, and there's chat, text, and image playgrounds. So let's go ahead and try it over there. Here I'm in the text playground, and you have to start by choosing a model category. So here I'm going to choose the Anthropic category, and then I'm going to select Claude Instant V1. So here I'm asking it, what are the 7 wonders of the world? And then I'll click Run. And after a while, you should see it generate this response. So this is pretty good. And as you'll see at the end of the video, the on-demand pricing is pretty cheap, but it's still important to understand how it works so that you don't get surprised by how much you're billed at the end of the month. And on the side here, there's a tab called Inference Configuration. And if you don't know what these are, then don't worry about them yet. But one important one is this length. So you can see here, my response from the AI is actually cut off at the end because the length is only 300. So if I want a longer response, I can increase that to maybe something like 500, for example. Now let's take a look at image generation as well. So go back to the Playgrounds tab and then click on this image playground. In the prompt box, just describe what you wanted to generate. Here, I'm asking for a high photo quality of a cat in a yellow spacesuit. And you can also add modifiers to the prompt. For example, things like 4K resolution or artistic photo, kind of nudge the AI towards giving you a better quality image. And once you have that, you can click Run. And after a while, you should see an output like this. And you can play around with these settings as well to see if it makes any difference. But I think the main one is the seed. So if you generate something with a different seed, it might come up with a totally different pose or a different composition. So let's try setting the seed to 5 here and then running this again. So this is the new result, and you can see it's still respecting the prompt, but it's just a totally different image. So if you just want to experiment with text or image generation, then the console UI is pretty useful. But things start to get a lot more interesting when you do this via code, because now you can use it as part of building your next application. Let's take a look at that next. To generate text with Amazon Bedrock from code, start with a new Python file. So here I've called this file generatetextclaude.py. And we're going to need to import Boto3, which is the AWS SDK for Python, and also the JSON library, because we're going to need to convert our Python objects into JSON data. Next, I'm going to store my prompt in a string. So this is the prompt I want to use to generate the text with. After that, I want to create a Boto3 client for the Bedrock runtime. And if this doesn't work for you, you might need to upgrade your Boto3 client because it might be using an older version where the Bedrock runtime is not available yet. Currently, I'm using this 1.28 version of Boto3, so if yours is much older than that, then I recommend you upgrading it. And you should be able to do that by just running pip install Boto3 and then -- upgrade. Now we're going to need to prepare the payload that we're going to send to the Bedrock client. And here I actually have to turn my prompt into a structure that has a human and assistant part to it. So I think the Claude AI model works like a chat, and it's kind of expecting human and assistant actors as part of the prompt. So here, if you have just a simple text prompt, you might just have to format it like this for Claude to accept it. And here you can decide how many tokens for the model to return to you in one particular sample. This is the max that it will be allowed to return. And in the next part of the code, we're actually going to invoke the model. This is going to be the API request that will give us our generated text. So you do that by running invoke model and then passing in this body as a JSON string, and then the model ID, which is going to be this Anthropic Claude model here, or you can use one of the other Amazon models if you don't want to use this one. And once you have this response, you can get the actual text. The text result from this invocation is just going to be this completion attribute on the response body, and then we can print it. Now that the script is ready, we can test it by running this file in our terminal. I've asked it to write me a 90s style one-liner pitch about a movie for a giant man eating python, and I think it's given me a pretty good response. Now, if you had an error when you did this, then just make sure that you've set up AWS CLI correctly in your terminal and that the default profile is using the same region that you've configured Bedrock for. I'll put a link to all of this code in the video description, so you can take a look at that if you just want to copy and try it out right away. I've also included another example using the Jurassic model instead if you don't want to use the Claude model. But try them out. In my experience, I found the Claude model a lot better, so I've had much better results from actually using this one. And just keep in mind that if you do switch to a different model, the input parameters and the response body could actually have different structures. Next, let's take a look at how you can generate images using Amazon Bedrock. Here I've got a new Python file and I'm starting with my prompt again. So my prompt is going to be for a golden retriever puppy running on a beach. And I've added a couple of modifiers here so that it's a nice high resolution HDR photo, and it's got blue sky and white sand. And next we're going to need to prepare our input parameters for the API request. And the structure is going to look like this. So this is where our text prompt is going to go, and I've generated a random number for the seed. Finally, there's these two other parameters, which for now I wouldn't worry about them. You can read up on them on the documentation if you want to see what they do. Otherwise, just put in any value, like these, for example. Next, we're actually going to invoke the API. So do that by first creating a Bedrock API client. And this time we're going to use Stable Diffusion as the model. And then just invoke the model with all of the parameters that we've prepared. Once you have the response body, this is how you actually get the image data. It's going to be base 64 encoded, so we have to decode it into image bytes first. And once you've decoded into bytes, you can pick a file to save that image to. So here I'm going to create an output directory, and I'm going to name it after the seed that I've randomized at the top here. And then finally, we're just going to use fWriteImageBytes to write this as a PNG file. So now our script is ready. Let's go ahead and run that in the terminal. This should finish running after a couple of seconds, and when it does, you'll be able to find your generated image in this output folder here. Just look at that. I don't know about you, but I'm totally blown away by the quality of images and text that you can generate from this. And I'm quite excited to see what people are going to build using these APIs. But before you go crazy with this, you might want to know how much it's all going to cost. So let's take a look at that now. Bedrock's pricing is an on-demand model, which means that there's no monthly fee and you just pay for what you use. It isn't super straightforward at first, but once you understand it, it's pretty simple and predictable to calculate. For text models, The calculation of the price is based on tokens. And tokens, you can almost think of them like words. So 1,000 tokens is about 700 words in English. And the AI pricing is based on how many tokens you send and receive from the model. It's pretty cheap, but it can add up quickly if you're unaware of how much it costs. So let's take a look at some of the models available here. There's 2 Claude AI models. There's the instant model, which is super cheap. This one, you'd probably have to use hundreds of thousands of tokens before it even starts costing you $1. The Claude V2 is more powerful, and you can see it's about 5 times more expensive than the instant model, but it's still pretty cheap in general as well. And finally, at the bottom, you've had the Jurassic 2 model, which is cheaper for output tokens than the Claude model, but more expensive for the input tokens. Now, the pricing difference is usually due to the model's size and quality. So the more expensive the models are, the idea is that they should give you better results for more complex use cases. However, as I mentioned earlier, I actually prefer the Claude models to the Jurassic model. So even though the Jurassic one is more expensive, for example, than the Claude Instant, I still actually prefer the Claude Instant model. So the pricing is not always a reliable indicator of the quality. You just have to try it out and see which models work best for you. For image generation, the pricing is a little different. It's pretty cheap as well, but it does add up a lot faster than text generation. Here, you can generate a standard image for about 2 cents using the Stable Diffusion model, or about 4 cents using the premium image. Whether or not an image is considered premium or standard depends on these parameters here. Anything over 50 steps is considered premium, and anything under is considered a standard image. And steps tells Stable Diffusion the number of times to kind of iterate with that image generation. I find that something around 50 to 80 usually gives pretty good results, but again, this is up to you to experiment. Higher doesn't always mean better. I've actually found that some prompts work better with lower steps than if you add too many steps to it. So it's up to you how many steps you want to use for your image generation, but just keep in mind that after 50 steps, you have to pay this premium image price instead of the standard image price. Now let's take a look at how Amazon's pricing compares to OpenAI. So at the top here, you have the 2 Claude models available on Amazon Bedrock. And at the bottom, you have the GPT models available on OpenAI. And you can see the pricing is quite similar. So GPT 3.5 Turbo is probably the cheapest out of the bunch, but not by much. And I'm guessing Claude Instant and GPT Turbo are roughly on the same power level, so to speak. For the larger models, however, Claude V2 comes in a lot cheaper than GPT-4, about half to 3 times as cheap. Now, I don't really know how the quality of the output compares between them, but from what I've seen so far, all of these models are pretty good. So again, you have to experiment and see if these models give you the output you want, but otherwise, the bottom line is that the pricing is quite competitive between the 2 services. But now, if you actually compare the features available on Bedrock versus OpenAI, at the moment, OpenAI is still a little bit ahead. This is especially clear in the function calling feature, system prompts, and the ability to fine-tune. The function calling feature is where you can define a JSON structure for the response to have. And this is useful if you want to create chatbots or make external API calls, for example, like getting the weather or sending an email. System prompts are a way to give instructions to the AI agent that it considers, I guess, at a higher level than the user. So for example, you've got this human user and then the AI response component, which you also have in the Claude model. But the Claude model, as far as I'm aware anyways, doesn't have this system role. So that's where usually you can put a bunch of instructions or limitations that you want the model to have as it interacts with the user. Fine-tuning is where you can take a lot of example data and then feed it to your model so that it can learn from those examples and then give you better quality responses. And as far as I know, Bedrock doesn't support that yet on the Claude model, but I do see options for it for other models, so it could be coming soon. Overall though, the core text generation capability and the pricing is quite similar between both Amazon Bedrock and OpenAI. So you might want to try out Amazon Bedrock if you're already running an AWS stack and you just want to plug it in to what you already have. I also look forward to see what features and what other models Amazon Bedrock will offer in the near future. That's going to be all for this tutorial. Check out the description below for the code and other useful links. If you've enjoyed this, then leave a comment and let me know what other technology or projects you would like to see covered next. Otherwise, I hope you found this useful and thank you for watching.